All right, I want to welcome everyone to this Hall of Fame Diamond Discourse meeting of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter of SABR. I'm Bruce McClure, the chapter chair, and we always hold our meetings in conjunction with the Gardner Waterman chapter in Vermont, Dr. Clayton Truder, chair. Now, I just want to remind everybody that if you want to be signed up to automatically get the login information for each of our meetings, send me an email directly at bruce@brucemcclurenh.com, and I could put you on the list. And the morning of each meeting, you'll automatically get a email which allows you to hit the join button and come right on into our 7 o'clock meetings. But tonight, Hall of Fame night, the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, New York, held their show on MLB Network tonight, and we found out that there are 3 new members of the Hall of Fame, one of whom was obvious, Ichiro Suzuki. Second of whom was a little less obvious, but we all had a feeling he was going to get in, and that was CC Sabathia. But Billy Wagner made the cut, and he's the final inductee this year. At any time, if you want to jump in and offer something, just unmute yourself and raise your hand. Go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the react button, and then hit the raise hand button, and we'll get you in line to discuss your hot takes, your thoughts, and words on all of our topics this evening. But I was able to find the numbers, and I wanted to start with these because these are very interesting. You should be able to see the numbers on the screen right now. And you will see that Ichiro was not unanimous. Now, there is no truth to the rumor that Jeff Cohen was the guy that left him off his ballot. But Jeff, unmute. What do you got, buddy?
I think it's what was expected. I mean, each row obviously should have been unanimous, but that's the way the voting goes. It's probably the same guy who didn't vote for Jeter,
right?
And just some old curmudgeon or something. Maybe believes that since no one else was unanimous except for Mariano, no position player, he didn't figure someone else should be unanimous. So, but it was just what we expected, wasn't it?
Lost you there, Jeff. Was
actually, yeah, that's it. It's just the three. Okay. Three of them were just. It was expected. Those were the 3. I mean, I didn't expect anybody else.
There were some very interesting numbers that were coming out of Ryan Thibodeau's tracker, even as of about 3 o'clock today, and I'll get to those in a few minutes. But one of the things that I said to my wife before we went on this evening is that I've got a feeling it's either somebody in New York or somebody in Cincinnati who took exception to a few things that Ichiro has said about Pete Rose over the years that didn't vote for him and made him a 99.7% guy. You see the other 2 who got in, Sabathia with 87% and Wagner with 83%. But then what I want to get to is the next guy on the list, Carlos Beltran at 70%. As of about 3 o'clock today, Beltran on all known ballots was trending at 82%. He lost 12% on unknown ballots, and I find that to be an astronomical number of voters who did not vote for him and kept their ballot away from the public. I don't know how many of those are going to be revealed over time, but that was a precipitous drop from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock this evening when Josh Rauch was on MLB Network giving the results. We see Andrew Jones at 66%, and then a big drop. Utley just beneath 40, A-Rod at 37, and then we go down the list and we see something very interesting. How does Omar Vizquel get more votes than Dustin Pedroia? Can somebody answer that question for me? Because I can't, I don't understand that. And it's a lot more votes from 47. So you should be able to see those numbers on the screen. Can somebody give me a thumbs up? Make sure I can see those. You guys, good. Thanks. What do you think? How do you guys What do you guys think of these numbers so far, and the way the writers are thinking this time around? Who's got some thoughts on that? Feel free to unmute, raise your hand, or just jump right in. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say. Nobody wants to hear what I got to say.
Bruce, I got to tell you,
Go.
if you don't mind me talking,
Of course not.
I see a lot of writers who fill up their ballots with 10 people. And I know you had a ballot that we sent in, and I'm proud to say that I only selected 2. Both of them are there. And when I read the writers, why they're getting in, why they should get in, I'm reading about Chase Utley. I mean, he was a good ball player. Most of these guys are very good ball players. Are they great players? Ichiro is phenomenal. There's absolute. I voted for Ichiro and I voted for Billy Wagner. The reason I voted for Billy Wagner is because there's very few left-handed relief pitchers in the Hall of Fame. He happened to be one of them. Everybody else on the list, maybe it's my anti-Yankee CC Sabathia that I didn't. But everybody else is undeserving of being in the Hall of Fame.
You don't think Sabathia deserves to be in the Hall of Fame?
No, I didn't say that. I said might be my anti-Yankee dislike. I'm looking over his statistics. He had 3 great seasons with the Yankees. I think he was really good with Milwaukee and Cleveland. I think that really got, he won the championship with the Yankees. But the rest of these guys, I don't know your stance on, PEDs. A lot of this, there's some guys on there, but the rest of them are I saw people voting for Jimmy Rollins and Chase Utley, and I'm sorry.
Very interesting comments. Jeff Cohen in the chat says CC has the highest ERA for a left-handed pitcher in the Hall of Fame, and that's very interesting to come up with. Everybody probably knows that I'm a big Hall guy. I don't believe in a real small lane for induction in the Hall of Fame. I would like to see it enshrine a lot of guys because the game's history needs to be celebrated and it needs to be expanded for those who are, for lack of better term, just coming up and just becoming aware in their baseball fandom. I'm just mystified, and I keep going back to Omar Vizquel got.
I'm going to answer that for you, Bruce.
Go.
Omar Vizquel, despite what he did with wife or whatever, next to Ozzie Smith, was the best defensive shortstop in our generation. He really was.
True.
And Dustin Pedroia is a nice player. If you would ask me who would I choose, it would be Omar Vizquel over Pedroia.
That's very interesting because the character clause, as far as I'm concerned, negates his.
No, I said that.
Yep,
I said with his wife or girl, whatever it is.
Yep.
But
also Pedroia. I'm sorry, Gary. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Jeff.
It's Pedroia's first year on the ballot, where Vizquel's been on a couple of years.
True.
Already.
True. And I mean, Andrew Jones is another guy who's had trouble with the same type of topic as well. John's got his hand up. Willie, I'm going to get to you too. John, go.
Yeah, I was thinking, I'm just looking at Vizquel's total hits. He had 2877. He almost had 3,000 hits. And Pedroia didn't have nearly as many hits as Vizquel did.
True.
And he was, I think, 270 lifetime average. 272. And I think Vizquel almost with 3,000 hits. I think it was a good call that he finished ahead of Pedroia.
Do we, in this new age of Hall of Fame voting, where you're seeing some of the newer writers taking a more moralistic idea of that character clause, they're really looking, some of the younger ones are really looking at that character clause. Do do we as SABR members and those who are looking at the analytics and such, are we discounting things like what Jones and Vizcael were accused of, or in some cases convicted of, for our votes, or do we take that into account? What do you guys think? Jump in.
I think it should be taken into account. I mean, but if you look at everybody in the past in the Hall of Fame, you could go back and you could see character flaws in almost everybody. You know,
And
we
that's
all
the other
have
side of the
character
coin.
flaws, actually.
Yeah, that's it. I am perfect, darn it. Are you kidding me? Perfectly nuts. Willie, save me. Go.
No, Bruce, it's okay. You all made great points. I think Jeff made the point I was going to make earlier with regard to Vizcal, Pedroia, and whatnot. Um, I like a big Hall of Fame too. But I worry that often you might cross into it becoming a Hall of Very Good, which is what the Pro Football Hall of Fame is in Canton, basically at this point, the Hall of Very Good. And so I think there is a line somewhere, and you can see the line breaking down in that chart you shared with everyone's vote percentage. Every year I forget what the exact rules are. But the one that stuck out to me is Mark Burley. Because when I was growing up between 2000 and 2010, and like in my teens and whatever, and I was obsessed with with watching every team and every game. It felt like every time you turned on the TV, that guy was having a complete game shutout or a perfect game. Or I think he at one point won a Gold Glove as well for a pitcher.
I think you're right.
Had
Yeah.
an incredible. He had at one point he had an incredible play that saved one of his no hitters, fielding a ball. So Mark Burley being that low was surprising to me. I didn't think he'd get on because I think he hasn't been on that long. Um, but I was surprised to see him so low. And with regard to Pedroia, I'm a Red Sox fan, born in the '90s. I mean, Pedroia was the guy when I was growing up. But I think Pedroia, his longevity in his career was an issue. Rookie of the Year in 2007, AL MVP in 2008. But then by the time 2016 and 17 rolled around, that was only less than a decade later, he ran into way too many injuries. And his longevity. I mean, the Red Sox should have been paying him up until 2 years ago based on his final contract extension. So I think that was an issue for Pedroia. But I'll leave it at that. Generally, Bruce, I agree with you. Big Hall is better because what separates baseball from the other sports is we have to lean into our history
That's what I'm
because
trying to say. Yes. Thank you,
yeah,
Willie.
because that baseball isn't about, in my opinion, like the big sexy moments like the other American sports are about. It's more about the nostalgia and the history and the growing up with it and all.
Okay, and I'm going to get to everybody who's got their hands raised in just a minute. But Willie, you've got a very good line of thinking here. You're talking about how baseball is not about those big, sexy moments. But I'm going to debate that you on that a little bit, because each of us on this call, and probably everybody who's got a SABR membership card, can name 10 big, sexy moments that they remember like yesterday.
Yes, and that's true. I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen probably a dozen or more, as you mentioned, plus all the ones that we know in history that maybe we weren't alive to see, like
There you
Babe
go.
calling his shot or Carlton Fisk hitting a home run against the Reds,
I was
well
there.
before my lifetime. That to me, I don't say those things don't matter, but it's less about. I think in modern sports, what baseball has a problem with is they want it to be like the NFL, where you see highlight reel after highlight reel, or the NBA, where it's constantly on Sports Center and it's something new that everyone can watch in prime time. And because baseball is so regional, you don't have those big viral national television moments that
Okay.
you see a lot in the other sports. It's very much it's more of a regional sport that we all sort of watch our teams and oftentimes don't get to see every single nationally televised game. And so because of that, we have to rely a lot on the past and the things that matter in the past. And some of those things do include moments like Babe Ruth calling his shot, or the Carlton Fisk home run, or the guy for the Pirates in 1960 whose name is escaping me.
Mazeroski.
So all of those things matter, but that's why they matter, because we have to rely as baseball fans on the past. So I generally do agree with you that you need a big Hall of Fame to do that.
If only they had the space. I mean,
Yeah.
a couple of things in the chat. Sean Moore says, I think the NFL Hall of Fame has a requirement to enshrine at least 5 players every year, which may result in it being the Hall of Very Good. I'm not sure if that's true or not. I don't have
It probably is.
That.
That makes sense.
Does make sense. You're right, Willie. And Jeff Cohen says, Mark Burley had 14 straight years of 200-plus innings. And year 15, he had 198.2. I mean, there's a workhorse if I ever saw one in today's modern game.
Yeah, it seemed like every time you turned on the TV and say between 2005 and 2010, he was throwing a complete game.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, he was on you couldn't drag him off the mound. And he still only got 11% of the vote. That's very interesting. Molly, go.
I might be jumping ahead in your schedule of events, so you can tell me to shush if necessary, but I was just wondering how our voting compared to the actual induction voting.
Oh, jeez. She hit third before I even hit second. All right. Somebody told me the job was going to be this dangerous when I married her. I mean, gee whiz.
Oh, shush.
I'm lucky I'm in a separate room. So we held our vote just like the BBWAA held their vote, ended it on December 31st. And our chapter had 49 responses. And as a chapter, not personally, but as a chapter, we like small hall. And we don't like unanimous votes either, because the only one that got in, you should be able to see this on your screen right now, was Ichiro, and he wasn't even unanimous. You can see that. If you can see that on the screen, give me a thumbs up. Thank you. So Ichiro was featured on 47 out of 49 ballots, and the next best vote getter was Sabathia at 59%. So you see our results are Burley only got 8%. Our vote, jeez. Beltran only got 32.
Wagner got the second amount.
Oh yeah, you're right. That's right. Wagner got 65. Yeah, I missed that. And then Sabathia. But either way, we only voted one guy in, which is not unlike last year. If I recall, last year we only voted one guy in as well. But that's what you get for being a statistically based voter, as opposed to, in some cases, voting on emotion. Dan or Jeff Cohen had to go. He's recording his latest podcast this evening. Francis, how are ya?
Pretty well.
Go get it, brother.
I just wanted to make one comment about the character
Please do.
judge for the Hall of Fame, and that would be that every voter, I'm sure, would make their own choices. But I've always thought that depending on the offense or the alleged offenses of the player, that is a judgment by the individual voter. But you can take away some credit, should be able to take away some credit when they discredit the game by actions off the field or on the field. Just as you could add credit to them if they conduct themselves in a different manner. So I basically have in my own mind, I believe, a plus and minus system of who's qualified or who's suited for the Hall, and that would be based on how serious the offense is, in my mind, given their performance on the field. For example, I use PEDs in the wrong time frame there when it was known to be illegal is a serious offense, in my opinion. But on the other hand, other people may look at it another way.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying that there are, for lack of a better term, degrees of sin when it comes to the character clause. Is that correct?
Yes, basically, yes.
Are you going to vote for somebody? Now I'm going to put you on the spot, Francis. Okay.
Okay.
So you've got somebody
I've been
like
there before.
okay. So you've got somebody like a Vizcala or a Jones who's been in deep trouble with the law for some fairly serious offenses that I think we all know what they are. Does that disqualify him on your ballot from getting a vote?
Probably so, unless they were a very top-notch player. But even if they were, I don't think I would vote for them. I just think if a player, the first thing you think about him is something he did that was a very bad thing, I don't think he ought to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there's a lot of guys that did horrible things over the years. There's some guys that were blamed for horrible things that it was later found that those stories were either elongated or not true.
Yes, and I think they ought to be more or less proven to be true. I mean, I don't think there should be a great doubt, but but in my mind, I'm more of a small hall guy than a big hall guy.
Okay. Let's go to Sean Moore. Sean, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Go get him. You're up.
Yeah, so I was going to comment about Dustin Pedroia, but I'd rather comment about once you threw up the results of our voting for the hall, and Chiro got 96% of our vote. I'm just curious to hear from anybody that didn't vote for Chiro, what the, I don't mean this in an antagonistic way, but I'm just curious to hear what the reasoning was for not voting for Chiro.
Is there anybody on the call who did not vote for Ichiro? Doesn't sound like it. There was one guy in the BBWAA who did not vote for Ichiro, and I would love to talk to that guy. And it was
what's the reason? Yeah.
I mean, I was discussing it with Molly before we got started this evening, and she came right back with a really good point and said, well, now, wait a minute, that might have been a woman who didn't vote for him. And my response to that is, I would disagree with that because, and I don't know as if this is right, wrong, or indifferent, but most of that old guard BBWAA member, they're men. The overwhelming majority of those members who got the voting right were males years ago. But as we have come into today's age, there are far more women with a vote. I wish Jeff was here because he talked to one last week and his podcast was phenomenal on it. In my opinion, those younger voters are where Ichiro was obviously unanimous. And if we tear that vote down, if we're ever able to find out who actually didn't vote for Ichiro, I think you're going to find it's somebody from either New York or Cincinnati who had trouble with something that Ichiro said, or they wanted Mariano to be the only unanimous one. Greg Kelleri just put up his hand. Unmute yourself, Greg, please.
There
Go.
I am. I'm unmuted. I think quite often when people do that, a writer might do it to give himself an opportunity to write a story and become a focus. Look, Ma, I'm a star.
Yes.
Write an article as to why. And I think it's a lot of that is based on what the writer wants, the writer's motivation, not so much an indictment or credit on the player. That's my opinion.
That's actually a very, very good take there, that you might see somebody who comes out, John's applauding it right now. You might see somebody come out with a feature story somewhere along the line in the next few days that said, I didn't vote for Ichiro and this is why I didn't. And he puts 8,000 words into it. And
yeah, just like one Boston writer who I won't name did not vote for Billy Wagner. Now, if Wagner missed by one vote, you could bet your bottom dollar or your season tickets that there would be an article by that writer this week about why I didn't vote for Billy Wagner.
I think I can name that writer. Was that Abraham who didn't vote for him?
No.
Dan Shaughnessy.
It might be him.
Yeah.
I saw that listed in the Globe last week, so I can't remember who it was, but who was on social media today who got pilloried for voting for Vizcael? He put his ballot up. It was Nightingale, Bob Nightingale, and he got pilloried on social media for voting for Vizcael, but he wasn't the only one. About 20% of the voters voted for him.
Bruce, do you think we missed the forest for the trees a little bit when talking about someone who still got 99.7% of all ballots? Like, what if it was 98.2 and there were 4 people that didn't vote for him?
Tom Seaver.
Yeah, right. I kind of agree with Sean about, like, I would like to talk to one of these people, figure out what they were, why, but at the same time, it's like, well, who cares? They were one of several hundred people who didn't. I want to talk about the fact that he still got 99.7 on his, what was this first time?
Yeah, each
yeah,
of his first,
yeah,
absolutely.
Had to have been, of course. Duh, of course.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's like still got 99.7. I don't want to miss the forest for the trees. I think Ichiro would want us to talk about his great career and not the fact that one bonehead decided to leave him off. So I don't know. That's just where I'm at with the whole unanimous thing.
And that's what Josh Rausch said after announcing the class was Brian Kenny asked him point blank, how many writers left Ichiro off the ballot? Raj said 1, but now wait a minute. He's in. And are we really going to remember that?
Yeah. What's it matter?
What does it matter? That's right. Ian had a great comment in the chat. And I'll get to John in just a second. We still don't know who didn't vote for Jeter. He's right. We don't, and we never will, and who knows? We might never know who voted for Ichiro, or the guy, or possibly a gal, or whoever it was, might turn around and write an 8,000 word feature story on why he didn't vote for him. John, go.
Yeah, when you were talking about Omar Vizquel before, I remember something about him getting in trouble, but I didn't know exactly what it was, so I just looked it up, and after I looked it up and read what I just read, I would not vote for the guy. No, I'm sorry. I would take my vote back. I would have gave my vote to Dustin Pedroia over Vizquel. Definitely.
I can tell you that much of what he was accused of might have taken place in a Major League Baseball clubhouse. Go out and search him. I'm not going to state it on a video that I'm going to put up on YouTube.
I'm sorry, Bruce. The article said, I looked it up on Copilot, and it said that it was while harassing an autistic bat boy while managing the Birmingham Barons, a minor league team affiliated with the White Sox. The lawsuit claimed that Vizquel demanded the bat boy wash his back in the shower.
Mm.
And
John, could I ask you something?
Sure.
I think Vizquel was a better player than Pedroia.
Right.
I would not vote for him because of what you're saying.
Right.
But I don't understand why you would say, well, I would then vote for Pedroia over Vizquel. Both of them don't belong. They're not Hall of Famers.
Well, yeah. I mean, Pedroia comes up a little short, but he did have a good career. I mean, it was.
Did he have a good career or a great career?
Well, want to talk
both
about
have good points here. Go on.
Second baseman that should be in the Hall of Fame that isn't.
Is Jeff Kent.
Jeff Kent, exactly.
Yep. I said I'm not a Yankee fan.
Right.
But I got to tell you, growing up, Don Mattingly was I grew up in the late 60s and the 70s. And I guess that's where my bias is. I saw the greats, the guys they've been putting in the last 15, 20 years. They're very good ball players. Do I consider them game wreckers? No. And I again looked up Billy Wagner. and there are no left-handed relief pitchers, stoppers, closers in the Hall. That's probably why he got in. He's very good.
Yeah.
But you know, when you're comparing to everybody else, the left-handed, he is the best.
I think they lowered the bar with the Hall of Fame, who gets in and who doesn't get in. Another argument you could bring up too is Harold Baines. And the reason why Harold Baines got in was because Jerry Reinsdorf was on the committee that got him elected in.
Is that Reinsdorf or LaRussa?
Was it Reins? I'm not sure.
Maybe both.
Reinsdorf got him in.
Yeah.
One of the things that I hear as we're debating this is that the idea of greatness in the sport has changed considerably. Now, the players that Gary and I watched, that you know, Dixie and I, Francis, I can go on, in the 60s and the 70s are titans of professional baseball. And you drag that into the 80s and early 90s, but compared to Hall of Famers who are getting in now, they're far and away better based statistically and whatnot. But we look at the game differently now, and greatness is achieved in different ways. And it's rated or analyzed in different ways. And you're seeing some guys get in earlier based on different analytical thinking now, as opposed to, 15 or 20 years ago with some of those guys. And some pundits will argue that that's what got Baines in. And frankly, we all know how Baines got in. It was Reinsdorf and LaRussa, for heaven's sake. That was completely obvious. And Baines was a compiler who was okay for a long time. And I never thought of him as once his Hall of Fame material, and all of a sudden the Veterans Committee votes him in. I'm like, oh, okay, well, here we are. All right. But speaking,
Bruce, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
CC Sabathia, I think you said 87%.
Yes.
So he first ballot Hall of Famer. Is his career really any different from Jack Morris, who I'm not a huge fan of, but he's a Hall of Famer, and it took him years to get.
That's true. That's true. Then now we start getting into all this, and I love these debates. I love getting folks together like this to do this, because there's so many nuances in Hall of Fame voting and the way that players are thought of, that these conversations get really interesting really quickly. And the debate between Sabathia and Morris. Sabathia has a long story of his career, and being a nice guy who overcame alcoholism, who beat all the odds to become a 250 win pitcher in Major League Baseball. And I think he garnered a lot of favor for votes. I'm not saying that he went out and campaigned for it, but I think a lot of guys remembered him, and a lot of gals remembered him as being a real good dude to the writers, where I think Morris was punished because at times he was not exactly the best quote in all of Major League Baseball, nor was he all that friendly in front of his locker. He was kind of a gruff guy, that they held that against him. And we see that repeatedly in voting, repeatedly.
Another example of that, Bruce, was Jim Rice. Look how long it took Jim Rice to get in.
Yes. Rice is a Hall of Famer. And they made him wait until his candidacy was ending to get in. And it honks me off to see that writers enact some sort of retribution for some innocuous thing that happened during a player's career. Dixie, You're up, man. How you doing, Dix?
I'm doing fine.
Go get them.
I will lay my cards, all my APBA cards on the table.
Mine are strat.
I will vote for Mark Burley every single time.
Yeah.
I am a big Hall of Fame person,
As am I. Yep.
and I don't trust the writers. I have not trusted the writers for 40 years. Why? Because they told me for 30 years at least, maybe 35, that Jacob Nelson Fox was not a Hall of Famer.
Right?
That is crap. And it was every single year that they didn't put him in.
Can't argue that point at all. I think I'm not I'm not going to say that I don't trust the writers. I'm going to say that I don't think the writers, in many cases, there are many who do, most of them carry a SABR membership card, that are thoughtful enough to look at the player and make good selections based on performance and comparison and analytics. Tyler Kepner is one of them. I think Rosenthal and Verducci are also two guys that really take their vote seriously. And then there's, a bunch of others that are like, oh yeah, he bought me pizza in Cleveland one time. Cool. I'll vote for him. Francis, you're up.
Yes, I just wanted to comment a little bit on the fact of the thought of going back, and maybe this is a question somebody can answer on this, because I'm an older man now, but I cannot remember picking up a newspaper in the 1950s or later for many years when there was such a debate over who's in the Hall of Fame. It just came out with certain names, and generally they were accepted. And actually, Dixie's point is very good on Nellie Fox, because I think he was one of the first that, in my recollection, that was debated a little bit, and people said there's an inequity there. But does anybody here in the 1950s, what I recall is you had guys who everybody basically seemed to agree were Hall of Fame worthy. And I think the media has changed, and the coverage of ball players has changed to such an extent now that the shift has been to, well, what about guys, who had some faults off the field or something like that just did not exist in the 50s or at least the early 60s. And then maybe it started changing. Maybe anybody here might be able to comment on that. But my recollection is you didn't pick up here in North Carolina. I didn't pick up the Charlotte Observer or another newspaper and see a whole bunch of debating about who got elected to the Hall of Fame.
Greg, go. Make sure you unmute. There you go.
There you go. Yeah. Well, the thing is, for instance, in the major markets, up until, I don't know when it was, 1970, I grew up in the Boston area. And I was lucky because we could get, where I lived in Lawrence, and we could get the Portland main station. So I did get to see the game of the week. But for the most part, people in major markets did not get to see players from other cities unless their own team played, because the game of the week didn't go into major markets. And the other hand too, like the National League, we never got to see them play at all before interleague play began and before the proliferation of broadcast television, cable television. So the fans' knowledge was limited, and we were restricted to whatever the print media told us. So I think it did have an effect. On the other hand, back then, in those days, the players had 15 years opportunity to make it into the ball. So the entire equation, the rules have changed, the exposure has changed. You know, if a writer didn't vote for someone, he's now today going to be asked, why didn't you vote for this guy? What did you think? Back then, people didn't question things. They didn't question what they read in the paper. They accepted it as gospel. And as a result, you have to remember, like in Boston, in many cities, they had, you know, Boston's the only city that had a writer who was known as Poison Pen. So, you know.
So Greg makes some very good points. I had to mute myself for a minute because Alexa over here was saying a couple of things that I was like, what are you talking about? But we have so much, and Karen, I'm going to go to you in just a minute. We have so much coverage of everything baseball today that it is only natural that we know more about the players, we know more about the votes, we know more about the writers, the front offices, the scouts, everything. There are writers are more investigative than they used to be. Evan Drellich being one, who is an exceptional writer, who, if I recall correctly, blew the lid off the Astros trash can scandal. There is, even with baseball still being so regional, and I debate that too, but that's a story for another time. Willie, we're gonna have to get together for lunch on that one. I can turn on my television. I can hit my button on my computer right here, turn on MLB Network, and I've got commentary about baseball all day, every day. I can do it at work. I can access MLB.com, Fangraphs, Baseball Reference. There is so much more out there that has given us pause to debate, that we don't take for gospel everything that's written. We amalgamate it and put it into our own little pot, stir it up, and come up with our own ideas. More so now than ever. We don't open up the paper on Sunday anymore. Sorry, folks, and read Dan Shaughnessy and believe him to be right on everything. Will McDonough, anybody like that. Karen Holleran, go.
You just told everything I was going to ask.
Okay.
So
what were you going to ask? And maybe I can make a fool of myself a little more. Karen, go ahead.
No, I'm done. You went into my mind.
This is why we love having you here, Karen, because Molly's like, oh my God, we just blew her mind. This is why we love having you here, Karen, because you are in tune with all of us.
I'm being quiet because I'm listening. And then I had a question, and all of a sudden my question just popped up, and I couldn't do anything else. So that's all.
Well, I'm glad I could answer it for you, even if you didn't get it out. I don't even know if I answered it right.
That was
Gus has turned his back on the whole thing. He's on Molly's view right now, saying, "I am done." Molly, say something so everybody can see. Gus,
he wants to be in the picture.
Gussie is contently purring. Can you hear him?
Not quite, but
he's
lovely
doing the
sound.
laughing.
One interesting thing tonight was when the MLB was at the hall and they just started off, and the president of the Hall of Fame said, "We have elected several people." I thought for sure there was going to be 4 or 5 people, not
so
just
did I.
50. So I figured that Beltre was in and maybe even Jones, but in the end it was only the 3.
Beltre lost a lot of votes.
I did email Cassidy Lint this afternoon just to ask her how her day was going. And she said it was extremely busy, and she was looking forward to tomorrow when everyone would be gone and things would be back to normal again.
I should probably get in touch with her and get her on as a presenter at some point.
Yes,
to talk
you should
about her
just
job
get her on to talk about what she does on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly.
It's unbelievable.
Exactly. Dixie, do me a favor. Send her an email and see if you can get her to get in touch.
I can work that deal.
I appreciate you. Let's go to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. And this is a list that's going to pop up on the screen here that, excuse me, should show future eligibles. If you can see that, give me a thumbs up real quick. Thank you. So these are future eligibles next year. Next year's ballot.
That's
And
not
I'm
a
looking
very
at-
good list, unfortunately.
Exact. Thank you. Who said that? Who was that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had
That
to
was
cut
Willie.
you off.
Yeah, Willie just hit third before I even hit first. I'm looking at this ballot next year, and I'm thinking that Andrew Jones and Carlos Beltran are going to gain a lot of votes. Because I mean Ryan Braun.
Eh.
You know, you see
Bruce,
Sin
why
Shi-
why should people gain a lot of votes because the eligibility list is not good?
Well, that's a very good question, but it happens all the time.
I know, I
mean,
don't understand.
yeah.
I don't understand that.
And you
Yeah.
see writers who make judgments based on, well, okay, I'm not going to vote for him this year because he's going to be on for another 8 years, so I can vote for him next year or whatever it might be. Willie, I think I stepped on your toe.
Or this is a bad list, and you know, if I have to vote for somebody, I'm gonna vote for this guy who didn't get in. That's not the way it should be.
I think you're
can't
both
argue the
right.
point.
You're both right. It's wild because, you know, I do think you brought up Drellick and the Astros a few minutes ago, Bruce. I do think had not that happened, Beltran is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Absolutely.
And that just poisoned everyone's mind about him because he is, in my opinion, he's with the rest of that group that you had earlier. And that, so I think it will be addition by subtraction for him, because he doesn't need that much, right? If he was at, what was he, 70 this year? If he's at 70, he only needs those people to vote for him again, and then maybe get 5%.
Right. But what was interesting was what, like I mentioned when we started this evening, is that as of 3:00 today, he was on 82% of known ballots and lost 12% on the unknown ballots. That's a lot of guys and gals who did not vote for Carlos Beltran.
The only one on that list
What's that?
I would even contemplate would be Cole Hamels, but then I just got done telling you about Mark Burley, and we just got done talking about left-handed pitchers like CC Sabathia. Andy Pettit's also on that list. All three of those guys had better careers than Cole Hamels.
Yep. So Ian Braun in the chat, just a quick look at 50s Hall of Fame induction results. Mel Ott was in on the 4th ballot, Jimmy Fox on the 8th, Paul Wainer on the 7th, Al Simmons on the 10th, Bill Dickey on the 11th, Joe DiMaggio on the 4th ballot. I didn't realize that. And Hank Greenberg on the 10th ballot. Those are some very interesting numbers. Ian, thank you very much for that. That was very that was some quick thinking there. The one
I think
what's that?
I made that comment earlier. This surprises me too. But I guess if these things had occurred in this day and time, there would have been a lot of columns written about it.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Mark Horrell has a good comment. He said they had a backlog of candidates, and that's very true.
Yeah.
One guy I hope that at least get. Go ahead, Sean.
I'm sorry. I interrupt here. Yeah. So just remember, there wasn't even a Hall of Fame until the late 1930s, right?
True.
So, you know, you had a lot of these players that are on this list played, you know, their careers were before there was even a Hall of Fame. So there was just a huge backlog. And that's why you get these weird things like Jimmy Fox on the 8th ballot. Come on. Joe DiMaggio on the 4th ballot. Come on. You know, but there was just a backlog.
True. But that goes to they're Hall of Famers. That's it. We don't necessarily, we wouldn't have talked about the fact that DiMaggio got in the 4th ballot had we not had this topic of conversation this evening. The one thing I kind of hope, just for the sheer comedy of it all, we all know he's not going to get in. I'm just being silly. Now, Hunter Pence is on the ballot next year. I want Hunter Pence to get in just so people in the crowd can have signs that read, you know, Hunter Pence brought his mother to the Hall of Fame today, you know, things like that they used to have out west for him. I don't know if anybody remembers those, but there was a group of fans that followed Hunter Pence around for years that had silly signs like Hunter Pence loves his mother and things like that. And it was a lot of fun for fans for a long time. Francis, go.
Well, I just want to come back again and refer to the to Ian's comment and ask a question again that I'm almost ashamed to ask.
Don't they? This is going to be great.
When there was a backlog, was there a limit of how many votes could be cast in a year by a media person?
Yeah.
That's an interesting. Yeah. Does anybody know? Because that's changed several times over the years.
I thought the list was 10 or 15 at one point. Even though the ballot had 20, 25 guys on it, you could only vote for 10 or 50. I forget what the number is, but there was a limit.
There's a limit of 10 now.
Bruce, could I make a comment?
Go.
William, you made a comment. I'm not saying you're wrong, so don't about the NFL.
We're all friends here.
I feel that the MLB is the same as the NFL. I really do.
You know, and that's why I said, and I agree with you, because I do like Big Hall in terms of telling the story of baseball. However, you're right. I mean, you think about it, and that's why I said you have a line where suddenly you go from Big Hall, we want the stars of the game here, to now it becomes the Hall of Very Good. And if anybody on that list that Bruce showed up for next year's eligibility makes it in, I would say you're creating a Hall of Very Good.
Yeah, and you're talking about statistics and how the game has changed. And John came up with, I'm biased because he played on my team. Jeff Kent leads all second basemen in basically every offensive category.
Yeah.
Was he the greatest defensive second baseman? No, but he was certainly adequate. And for him not even to be on the ballot is a disgrace. It really is.
He was on 1 year and didn't get
he was on. I think he was on for a number of years and just never had enough. He got like 17%, and then he dropped off.
So this goes to wasn't Jeff Kent? Didn't he have a negative?
The press didn't like him. He was.
There you go.
He was.
Well, that's Curt Schilling, and I know we're not supposed to talk about that, but that's
exactly, okay. That's okay.
That's exactly true with Curt Schilling, because if he wasn't a jerk to the media and didn't say certain things, he's in the Hall of Fame. He has better stats than CC Sabathia, who just got in today, and it's the truth. So yeah, if you're a jerk to the writers, they're not going to reward you. And that's the story of Curt Schilling's career, unfortunately.
Schilling talked his way right out of Major League Baseball, let alone Hall of Fame contention.
Yes, I know, but I know we're supposed to pretend he's now not a good baseball player as a result. But I mean, you look at the statistics, you're like, geez, that guy's a good pitcher. He should be in the Hall of Fame.
I mean, you can't pretend that Curt Schilling wasn't a good pitcher because the guy pitched the Red Sox in 2 World Series. But
yeah.
He's on the same list as another guy that I have mentioned frequently. If Alex Stace is watching this after the fact, he's going to roll his eyes at me again. But he's on the same list as Pete Rose, as far as I'm concerned, because the things that he said and he did were just plain scummy. And now he's persona non grata. He has wiped his social media clean. Nobody's heard from this guy in several years. And frankly, that's okay. That doesn't make him a dummy, and it doesn't make him a lousy baseball player. It makes him a terrible person, just like the guy I just mentioned. I'll go to Francis in a minute. Greg, go.
Yep. Sorry, I don't know how to use the raise hand feature here, but
that's okay.
The thing about Schilling, I think what the writers are afraid of, like everybody was said, he pitched his way into Cooperstown and talked his way out. But the big problem that I think they had, that a lot of the writers had, is not so much that he didn't get along with the writers. Jim Rice didn't, certainly. But I think they were afraid, what is he going to do on that Sunday afternoon when he steps up to the Clark Center, the microphone, for his induction speech, and in front of anywhere from 50 to 75,000 people in a worldwide television audience? What's he going to say in that microphone? And how does that reflect on baseball?
It's a good point. Well, Willie in the chat put something. He said, "Sorry, everyone, for bringing up Schilling. It blew up the call." That there's nothing to be sorry about here, because it is a valid point amongst Hall of Fame talk these days. And I think it's he's an interesting person to discuss at times, but I can't change my viewpoint that he's on that same list as that other guy that played in Cincinnati. I want to go to Francis in a minute, but I want to get Dan Mason in here because he made a good comment in the chat that I want him to discuss for a minute. Dan, go, would you please?
You know, if you're saying the Baseball Hall of Fame is a Hall of Fame of, you know, great players only, the numbers say they're just about the same. Now, you can argue differences between the sports, and, you know, there are people out there like, hey, kickers and punters should never be in the Hall of Fame, and I'd rather have this quarterback in than put 3 offensive linemen in. You know, you could have that argument. But essentially, they've got about the same amount of their percentage of all-time players in. Couple of things I wanted to get to. First of all, the second baseman that should be in is the first guy I think of is not Jeff Kent. It's Lou Whitaker.
I agree with that too. Yep.
Lou, you know, and when you look at things through a statistical lens, Jeff Kent and Dustin Pedroia are actually very similar players. I think they're about 3.5, 4 WAR apart career. Lou Whitaker is 15 WAR above Jeff Kent. He was on the ballot for 1 year. I think he got something like 2% of the vote. It's the baseball writer's biggest mistake, arguably, that Lou Whitaker was on the ballot for 1 year and didn't get in.
Wasn't Whitaker on a Veterans Committee ballot too, and he didn't get anything?
I don't know. I'm not totally sure, but, you know.
I mean, Whitaker should be in.
Nothing.
Kent should be in, as far as I'm concerned. I'm with you on that.
You know, and to further make the point I'm making, you know, the 2 pitchers Gary mentioned earlier, Sabathia and Morris, you look at their wins and losses in the ERA, they look similar, but you compare them with something like WAR, and Morris is 2/3 of the player that Sabathia is. Sabathia is in the mid-60s for WAR. You know, Morris is 43. I mean, those are not comparable players. And you could still argue for Jack Morris in the Hall of Fame because, well, you just put Dave Parker in, you got Harold Baines in, right? If the line's 40, then those guys are Hall of Famers. But if the line's 60, it's a different story.
Point well taken.
All right, I'm out.
Dan's numbers in the chat. The Pro Football Hall of Fame has 1.62 all-time NFL players enshrined, while baseball's Hall has just shy of 1.7. Sean Moore put up, I'll get to everybody with their hands up in just a moment. The Pro Football Hall of Fame's bylaws stipulate that between 4 and 8 new members are selected each year. However, the exact number of enshrinees varies. The other comment came from Mark Hoyle. There it is. Came from Mark Hoyle. The media interacted with the players differently then than over now, which is absolutely true. And years ago, in a lot of cases, they had to work to get a story. And then he comes out with another ball player that he is offering that's along the lines of Whitaker and Kent, and that's Bobby Grich. Grich is right there war-wise as well, according to Dan Mason with Whitaker. Let's go to Francis again. Go.
Yeah, Whitaker too, but I think there's an injustice there in a couple of ways, a couple of second basemen that we mentioned. But I did want to go back to the early mention earlier about Jeff Kemp, and particularly when he was mentioned in the same comment, I believe, as Schilling. Am I correct that basically Jeff Kemp was just a grumpy guy? Did he ever say anything that really was terrible, or did he just refuse to talk to people?
I'm not exactly sure because, of course, Kemp was a West Coast guy, but didn't he do something with a motorcycle or something or other? Do I recall?
I think he did.
Gary, help me out here. I was hoping you would jump in.
I believe he lied about, but I also know Madison Bumgarner did that 1 year. I think he did that, but again, he was hurting himself. He didn't come out and say anything bad about people. And I'm not on this Jeff Kent bandwagon because I'm a Giant fan. The game has changed, and you can compare people today. Pedroia versus Kent, different criteria was used back then. They didn't have this, war stuff and this and that. That's my opinion. I looked at my own feeling was like when Jim Rice came into a game and was up at the plate, if I was the other team, I'd be very, very nervous.
Yep. There were years that Rice was the most.
Absolutely. And Don Mattingly the same way. My own guy, Will Clark, if he stayed with the Giants and didn't, go to sign with the Rangers, I'm pretty sure he'd be a Hall of Famer.
Yep.
That's just my opinion.
Molly, you're up.
So kind of steering a little off what we were just talking about, but kind of staying in the topic about people who we think should or should not be in the Hall of Fame. Or the fact that they were part of history making. Schilling's not in because of his attitude. We all agree about that. And then we have Pete Rose, and we all know that story. But then we have Tommy John, who was
my wife coming in hot. Go.
Who was amazingly a risk taker to try a surgery that was never done before in hopes of saving his career. And the surgical apparatus and a demonstration of what they did is in the Hall of Fame, but he's not there. And I understand the Hall of Fame is based on numbers and based on what you did, but I think in terms of character clause, I think that has weight.
Tommy John's numbers dictate to me that he should have been given more thought for the Hall of Fame than he got. If I recall correctly, he was on a Veterans Committee ballot a couple of years ago and didn't make it off the Veterans Committee. And frankly, that's bunk, because the players themselves should know that he agreed to pioneer a surgery that has saved the careers of how many guys? John was on this past. He was?
Yeah, he was on the he was on the ballot with Donaldson. And,
that's right. He was on the ballot this last ballot, and he didn't get any traction. And that's baloney, because he agreed to undergo this surgery and be a trailblazer and say, hey, you know what? If it doesn't work, I was done anyway. And it was the beginning of a revolution in Major League Baseball, just as much as Marvin Miller's hire was in the 60s. And he's in after stating that he didn't want to be in after he died.
Bruce, to plug you for tomorrow, very Roger Bresciahan.
Yes.
He is, if you look at his statistics, he got put in by a Veterans Committee way after the fact. He helped with the catchers, not uniform, what he used, shin guards and stuff like that. So that should be a hot topic tomorrow.
There you go. Let's go to Dixie, then I'll go to Ian. Dixie, go.
We've been talking about bunk. And one of the biggest bunks is, of course, we know why Curt Schilling is not in. And we've been debating here Don Mattingly, which I can go for easily. But the biggest bunk in this part of the country is Louis Tiant.
Yes.
And as for, there was a little comment before about the Football Hall of Fame and the punters and kickers. Well, I never paid any attention to the Football Hall of Fame until they put my guy in, and that guy was Ray Guy.
Ha. So there you go. Let's wind it up with Ian. How you doing, Ian?
All right, Bruce, thank you. So yeah, just to comment back on my earlier comment, I was just putting out there to say there's always been debates about the Hall of Fame. Periodically, there will be backlogs. There was one about a decade ago because of the PEDs. It's been a 10-player limit since 1936. I did look that up. And lots of eligibility changes over the years, so it gets a little complex. As far as this year's ballot, I can't see a reason not to vote for Ichiro. That's the one clear. I would have voted for more people than that, but I can also see why people would vote against several of those people, whether it be character clause or just didn't have the same stats as or careers as some other, very valued Hall of Famers. So I get it. I think I would lean toward the bigger Hall of Fame, and I probably would have voted for 4 or 5 guys on that list. But that's what the fun is, right?
And that's why these debates and these topics are so much fun to discuss in formats such as this. We all have our own ideas, and they're all as valid as the next person's. And it's fun to see how all of these minds mesh and come together to form, for the most part, a consensus. And that's what makes baseball so much fun. Is as much fun as it is to go to a game and watch that game in person, getting home and talking about that game, yesterday's game, or even stuff like this. It just makes it so much more fun. Before I roll out of here, Gary, what's going on Thursday with the New York Giants Preservation Society?
I have a gentleman, an author named Eric Gray. He's going to be talking about people's memories at the ballparks.
Huh.
What I really have, he's going to be wonderful. But anybody, the following week, we have William Behrens. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No.
He is a sculptor. He sculpted all of the statues around Oracle Park. Mays, McCovey, Perry, Marichal, Cepeda. He also did Tom Seaver here in New York, Pee Wee Reese and Jackie Robinson in Brooklyn. Anybody who wants to hop aboard, Bruce will give you my email. But that's, very different from an author speaking about a book. I think that'll be a fascinating topic. So thank you for asking, Bruce.
Absolutely, Gary. Gary's got a lot of great presenters there. You should get in touch with him and get on his email list if you want to be part of the New York Giants Preservation Society. But on that note, let's do this again. I don't know, tomorrow night. Let's do it again tomorrow night when Sabres East Coast Cooperative brings you John Hussman, presenting his new book, Roger Bresnahan, A Baseball Life. This first ever biography based on many years of research covers Bresnahan's entire life and playing career as it intersected with American history. It is sure to be a very fascinating discussion, and I hope I'm going to see a lot of you there. The sign-up link is included in the chapter meeting booklet sent out each Monday, and it's also available on the SABR events calendar at sabr.org/events. If you are on the automatic sign-up list, you will receive the link to sign into the meeting tomorrow morning. And finally, if you're a baseball fan watching on YouTube and you like what you see, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to be alerted to each of our weekly uploads. And if you are not yet a member, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research communities, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds just like these across the world. For more information, go to sabr.org/join today. You guys are fantastic. This has been a great meeting. I can't wait to get this up on YouTube and share it with the baseball community. But let's get everybody out of here, and we'll see you all tomorrow night. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.